Today we're going to look at the other elements of development in infants. So we're going to go over emotional, social, and cognitive development. What are some of the things that they need to accomplish before they hit their first birthday? So we're going to start with emotional and social development, and it begins the day that you're born. You start to make emotional and social connections with your caregivers. Now, remember, we talked about this. Newborns prefer to look at a face because our faces are animated. All right, we have surprise, we have anger, we show affection through our facial expressions. And so infants learn about emotions by watching our faces. And eventually, as they get a little bit older, they will start to imitate the expressions that we make. And that's kind of their first experience with emotions. What face do people make when they're happy? What do they make when they're surprised, angry, sad, all of those kinds of things? And so if you have a baby that's about 3 or 4 months old and you open your eyes really wide and open your mouth, they will start to imitate you because they're learning about emotions. Now, looking at a face is also a super important part of bonding. And the theorist that studied social and emotional development is Erik Erikson. We talked to him about him way back in August. But he said the first stage of this emotional and social development is trust versus mistrust. And how we develop trust in our caregiver is through bonding. Right? It's important that caregivers are consistent, that when the baby cries, they respond to it. When they have a messy diaper, it gets changed. When they're hungry, it gets fed. When they're cold, they get wrapped in a blanket. So consistency. Okay, babies also prefer a predictable routine. Everybody gets up in the morning, you get dressed, you have breakfast, they go down for a nap. All right, when they wake up, it's lunchtime, maybe some playtime, and then just a routine that goes throughout the day. Some of you prefer a routine, and so when we're on a soft closure, it messes up that routine and you kind of don't know what to do with yourself because you need that routine. And then the last is that you meet their needs. Right, so if you're doing all of those things, that creates that bond and they learn to trust you. If you're not doing those things as a caregiver, then they start to mistrust and then that can cause problems later in life. Now, some normal stages that infants go through, kind of emotionally and socially. The first one is stranger anxiety. And this is where the infant is afraid of unfamiliar people. Right? It starts at about 8 or 9 months old. And this is actually a positive thing because it means that their brain is developing enough and they are attached to you enough that they fear strangers. And it doesn't just have to be Santa, although Santa is a terrifying thing for children, especially really young children, because they don't realize that he's going to bring them a present. We just sit them on this stranger's lap that's all hairy and says ho 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 in a deep voice, and we expect them not to be afraid. It's a very weird thing that we do. He's terrifying to a small child. The next one that's kind of normal is separation anxiety. And this is where the infant cries when the caregiver leaves. It can be super hard for the parent, especially if they're working and they have to drop that baby off at daycare. But it's a good thing because it means that they remember you. They know that you are the person, you're their person, you're there for them. And if you're not there, they kind of worry, are you coming back? So it can start as early as 5 months, but it peaks at around 9 months. And then when they're toddlers, it comes back even stronger. They just don't like to be separated from their primary caregivers. All right, now we're going to kind of switch gears. We're going to talk about cognitive development. This is how infants learn, how their brain develops. And the theorist that studied this was Jean Piaget. And he said that from birth to about 2 years old, we are in what's called the sensory motor stage. And infants learn through their senses. It's why everything goes in their mouth, because they're learning about touch, feel, taste, smell with their senses. It's very normal. You don't need to worry about it. Just make sure that their toys are safe, small things are picked up off the carpet once they start crawling, because it's going to go in their mouth. It's how they learn about the world. So some cognitive milestones is they're going to act to get results. So they start to learn cause and effect. So if you've ever been around like an 8 or a 9-month-old baby, they'll drop the toy and wait for you to pick it up. As soon as you pick it up and hand it back to them, they drop it. All right, that's where they're acting to get results. Or toys that allow them to push a button and it makes a sound or it moves. They start to realize that there's a cause and effect. They start to solve problems. And this is where toys can really help. Like if you have blocks that are shapes and they put them into a box and have to match the shape, all right, even though that seems kind of complicated, it's helping them solve a problem because they start to look at the shape, feel the shape, and then figure out where it goes. And they imitate others, right? They imitate their facial expressions. They'll imitate things like the way they walk, the way they laugh, all of those things. And the last milestone is they look for hidden objects. Up until they're about 9 or 10 months old, if you take a toy away from them and switch it with another toy, they aren't going to remember it because once it's out of sight, it's out of mind. All right, once they hit about that 9-10 month mark, they start to remember that they had a different toy and you switched it, and so they get mad. All right, this is why peekaboo is such a popular game with little kids, because if you are completely hiding your face like behind a blanket or something and you pop back out, you've like blown their mind because for that little bit of a minute you were out of sight, so they didn't think about it. All right, so once they start to realize object permanence, they know it exists, they'll start to look for a toy that you hide, and this is also when that separation anxiety kicks in because they realize, hey, my mom and my dad aren't here anymore, and I remember them. They're the ones that feed me, change me, and put me to bed at night. Where are they? So object permanence and that separation anxiety kind of work together. So because infants are learning through play, it is super important that they have opportunities to play. All right, now, but infants play a little bit different than what we consider play. So the first thing is solitary play. This is where they just play by themselves. And you see this if you work in a daycare with around a lot of children the same age. While they're all on the floor playing together, they aren't really playing together. They're kind of in their own little world playing with their toys. Right? They really don't communicate with each other, and they for sure do not share. Sharing doesn't come until you're much older. All right, so you just play by yourself. Even though you might be next to somebody, you're not really interacting with them, so we consider that solitary play. Once they get a little bit older, by about the end of the first year, they have what we call onlooker play. And this is where you sit back and you watch others play. And so you'll see a lot of like younger toddlers, they think they're playing like at the park, but really what they're doing is they're just watching. And it's important because you're learning about the rules of play. You're learning how to take turns, how to share, how to interact with peers. Right? So even though you're not really playing, you're just watching, you're still learning a lot and taking in what older kids are doing so that you can imitate it later. Also, along with onlooker play is waiting for your turn. Like when you play duck, duck, goose, you're not actively playing unless you're the duck or the goose. And so onlooker play teaches how to wait for your turn. All right, last thing we're going to talk about today is language development, how we learn to talk. All right, so first, the ways of communicating is simply through crying. Right? Then eventually we start to coo. So, and we typically make vowel noises. So, ah, ooh, eh. Right? Because those are easiest to pick up in whatever language you're learning to speak, or those vowels. All right, then we have babbling. So at this point, they add a consonant to those vowels. So, ma, 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 ma. A lot of people get excited that they just said mom. They really didn't, all right? They're just adding those consonants that they hear in their language to the vowel. Ba, 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 ba. Da, 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 da. Right, then eventually they say a single word. Typically it's hi, mom, dad, no is a popular first word, but just simple one-syllable words. And then by about the end of the first year, they may or they may not be putting words together. So, but it's only going to be like 2, maybe 3 words at a time. By about the first year, it's still probably just single words that they're able to get out and have it actually mean something. A few kids can put 2 or 3 words together, but they're not speaking in complete sentences by the end of the first year. All right, that's it for today. I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving break. Don't do your homework, just take the time off. You do have an assignment today about evaluating infants' toys, so please complete that, and I will see you next week.